So welcome everybody, and welcome to those of you who are watching on videotape. The theme tonight is, as you know, is telling the truth. And as I was thinking about this topic, it's a really hard thing. If you're going to speak honestly and you're going to speak from the heart, and you're going to take into consideration other people's feelings, and you're going to do this mindfully and in the moment, that's a tall order. That may be the most difficult mindfulness practice of all, is being mindful during conversation. And there's a saying, sometimes it's attributed to Buddha, but I've had experts tell me, no, Buddha never said this, but it's a pretty good saying just the same. And it goes like this. It says, if you know something hurtful and not true, don't say it. If you know something hurtful and true, don't say it. If you know something helpful and not true, don't say that either. If you know something helpful and true, say it, but find the right time and the right way. Now that's a pretty tall order. And most gossip and rumors fall in the first three categories. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience. Somebody comes up to you and they say, can you keep a secret? I just heard something. You can't tell anybody else. Ever had that experience? Yeah. And then what happens? So if you're really good, you don't say anything, but that isn't what most people do. And the irony about secrets is that the bigger the secret is, the harder it is the faster it spreads. And there's a saying, I can keep a secret, it's just the people I tell it to who can't. And years ago when I was working at Intel was growing so fast, there was rumors and gossip about everything. If you ever work for a company or that's of any size, rumors about affairs and rumors about who's going to be hired, who's going to be fired, rumors about the direction of the company, rumors about the secretary. There's just everything. And the hotter it was, the faster it traveled. So I did a little calculation. And that time there was 8,000 people at Intel. And so I calculated if each person who heard a rumor told it to just two people they could trust, not to spread it. And of course they would do the same thing. How long would I calculated how long it would take to get through the whole company. Anybody want to guess?
20 days.
20 days. Any other guesses? Less than that. It's less than that. It's about an hour.
Oh.
If it happens every Jim, there's some chairs in the dining room there. Just grab one. Behind that door, you'll find a chair. On the left. There you go. So the number turns out to be, if you do the mathematics, everybody shares within 5 minutes, two people they can trust, then talk to two people they can trust, 65 minutes, 8,000 people, assuming it spreads evenly. That's a lot, that's fast. And a friend of mine once had something very wise to say about secrets, and she said, when anybody says to her, I'm going to tell you something you can't share with anybody, don't repeat it. You know what she says? She says, well, don't tell me. So I don't want to hear it.
Why are they telling?
Yeah, exactly. But that is what happens, right? Because they really believe that it's not going to go any further. I don't know what they believe. And I figured my friend believed in Ben Franklin saying, he had a saying about this. He says, 3 people can keep a secret as long as 2 of them are dead. I actually think that even that doesn't quite work. So if we're reduced to saying only what's helpful and what's true, and actually some teachers take it even further than this. On your handout there's a quote from Sylvia Boorstein. She says, not just helpful and true, but also kind. I say, well, how do you do that? If it's something that's a difficult thing, and if it's something that's sensitive, how can you be, does that really work in all situations? And on that same handout, there's a really brilliant quote by Steve Hagen, which is so good that I couldn't possibly paraphrase it and have it come out nearly as well as he said it, so I'm going to read it. He says, my Zen teacher used to say, kind speech is not always kind. Generally, of course, a gentle word or compliment is most conducive to serenity, goodwill, and waking up. But just as you would not refuse to vaccinate your child because the procedure is painful once in a while, there's a fleeting moment or the kindest thing you can do for another is to utter a severe word or a sharp observation that may hurt momentarily. The child is about to dash into a busy street, may need to be told to stop, sharply to stop. But, he says, before you speak, you must examine your own mind and motive. If you're trying to put somebody down, or if you're about to speak from malice or spite, then don't speak at all. But if in that moment you must tell someone, for instance, I'm saddened by how you treated Jim this morning, I think you owe him an apology, then you should say it. Or perhaps for a friend's health, sanity, and well-being, you need to say, I think you got a problem with alcohol. If you continue drinking as you do now, you're going to accomplish little else, and you cause your family to suffer as well. That would be difficult and it could hurt, and it could appear very cutting at that moment from the outside, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not kind. It depends on your motive. And he says, be sure to first observe your own mind. And he goes on to say, the point is not so much to be concerned with the actual words you speak. Isn't that hard to figure out what you're going to say in a sensitive situation, or even the tone? He says, instead, be concerned with observing your own heart and mind. And this is where mindfulness comes in. He then says, then speak out of your awareness of what you observe in your heart, your mind, the situation. The words you select and their tone will follow appropriately. And you'll be speaking out of wisdom and compassion. Isn't that beautiful? You see why I read it rather than try to paraphrase that. Paraphrasing would really do it justice. There's something in business management circles called the Abilene Paradox. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's an organizational dynamic in which a group agrees together to do something almost every single person, sometimes in extreme cases, every person believes is a terrible idea. But nobody speaks up because they each think that they're alone in having that view. You've seen that happen, right? And they do that out of fear of looking stupid or being challenged. And then no one objects and a bad idea goes forward because everybody thinks everybody else agrees when nobody has. It's well documented that's how we got ourselves into the Bay of Pigs during the Kennedy era. It's how the Watergate break-in got approved in the Nixon era. In both cases, the presidential advisors, almost to a person, thought it was a terrible idea. It was a rotten idea. Some of them even thought it was, in Nixon's case, thought it was insane to go and break into the headquarters. It was just insane to do that, but nobody objected because they thought they were the only one. And a similar group dynamic took place in 1986. That was the night before the Challenger space shuttle was about to be launched. That night, there was a conversation between the Morton Thiokol engineers that were responsible for the booster rocket, having a conversation with NASA, and they said you shouldn't launch. And they were overridden by the senior engineering manager, and of course it did launch. And the seal that they were afraid was going to fail did fail, and the Challenger blew up and 7 crew members got killed, including, you might remember, Krista McCullough, the 6th grade teacher, and her kids were watching at the time. So there's a lot more about that. It makes you wonder also if something similar might have happened with the Boeing 737 MAX. Yeah. They took out a safety feature that was standard, didn't make it standard anymore, and it's more complicated than that, but that could have made a difference between having those 2 planes crash and 350 people die. So for those, there's more to all of this, but those of you who are interested, I've got a really good article about the Abilene Paradox by the guy who coined the term. He's really kind of a fun person to read or listen to. And also the backstory about the space shuttle launch. I had the opportunity to speak with one of the engineers who was at that meeting. And he was a whistleblower. If it hadn't been for him, it might not have gotten out just what had happened that night before. And it's a longer story, but he got reassigned, demoted, and wound up losing his job. But most of our conversations aren't really about life and death decisions or about decisions that could cost us our jobs. Of course, there are managers like Samuel Goldwyn. He predates even my time, so you might even not know who he is. The movie mogul of the 1950s. No, Samuel Goldwyn.
Yeah, from Goldwyn Mayer.
Yeah, from the movie company. He said famously, "I don't want any yes men around me. So I want everyone to tell me the truth, even if it costs them their jobs." Well, you can probably think of a political leader who thinks similar things. A more mundane example, and one that has a happier ending, is an interaction I had with an Intel executive 25 years ago when I had a product that Intel was marketing, and a meeting was called for that product, and I realized a week before I wasn't going to be able to make the meeting. The reason I was going to miss the meeting was because of did I say this? It was a birthday party for Lauren and I were planning a birthday dinner for our daughter Tracy. And it was going to be family and friends. And I just couldn't miss that. And I was supposed to be flying to Portland to go to do that meeting and meet with some of the marketing people, some of the engineers. And the guy who organized the meeting, his name was Paul, he's one of these hard-driving Intel types, no nonsense, no excuses. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. And I was dreading that phone call I was going to have to make, and I called him up, and sure enough, he just exploded. He says, "You've got to be kidding me." He says, "We called this meeting for you." We've got engineers flying in here from Phoenix, and you're not going to be here. Now I've got to cancel the meeting. He says, "What could possibly be that important?" And I went through my mind, all the scenarios. What could I possibly make up? And everything I could think of, nothing was going to fly with him. So I didn't know what else to do but tell him the truth. I said, "Well, it's my daughter." I said, "We're planning a special birthday dinner for her. Family and friends are going to be there." I said I was going to be there. And I was expecting him to continue to blow up, and he just stopped, and he said, "Oh." I said, "How old's your daughter?" I said, "She's 9. He says, "Oh, my son's 8. He said, if I told my son I was going to be there and I didn't make it, it would break his heart. We'll reschedule the meeting." He never mentioned it again. We worked together for years after that. He never ever mentioned that I had that meeting, had to cancel that meeting and reschedule it and all the work he had to go through. And I know if I hadn't told him the truth, that phone call would have gone very differently. He would have still been mad, and I would have continued to believe that Intel managers don't have hearts. So one last story I want to share with you, and it's a story Jack Kornfield tells. And it goes like this. Once a healer was summoned to say a few words of prayer over a very sick child. When the healer came, the father said he didn't believe in such a superficial way of healing. The healer turned to him and said, "You know nothing of these matters. You're an ignorant fool." Of course, the father got angry and started to get red and started to shake. But before he could say anything, the healer spoke again, and he said this. He says, "When one word has the power to make you hot and angry like this, why should not another word have the power to heal?" What we say to each other and how we say it matters. In the video that I chose for tonight, Tara Brach suggests that if we had literally no other practice than bring mindfulness to our communication, that it would change our lives, would transform ourselves. We'll do a meditation, and as we usually do, we'll start with a guided part, and then there'll be a silent part. And had somebody last month who says, in those meditations you're asking people to recall things happened in the past and what they imagine for the future, and is that really mindfulness? It's not present moment. Says, but it's possible to have a present moment experience about the past and about the future. So as I make those suggestions in the meditation, you might reflect on how it's affecting you now, what images come up, because those are present moment images. They're images of the past, but you're experiencing them in the moment. What feelings come up for you? What thoughts? In the last part, you can do the meditation however you like. It can be a breath meditation, or you can continue on with that theme. So just making yourself comfortable. And just beginning by kind of checking in physically first, how it is to physically to be here, how your feet are making contact with the floor or the couch, how the weight of your body is making contact with the chair or the couch, feeling your arms and your hands, how they're resting on your knees, or your hands may be holding each other, clasping somehow. And when you're ready, check into breath. Just wherever you experience it. It could be your tummy or your chest or your throat. There's no wrong place to feel your breath, just so you can sense it as it's moving. So each breath you can feel. And noticing the whole cycle. It's not just breathing in, breathing out, it's breathing in, breathing in, breathing in, and then there's that place where on its own it turns around, it becomes breathing out. It actually stops just for a moment. And as you sit here, you might recall if there was a time where there's something that seemed like it needed to be said, something that was true for you, but you didn't say it. And this would be a time where you didn't say it, and there may have been some regret about it later. You felt later that you could have said something. So just seeing if you can recall a time like that. It didn't have to be something big, but could have been something that nobody else was saying, or something that needed to be said to somebody. Not necessarily corrective, maybe something positive about somebody, but you didn't say it at the time. And now when you look back on it, you wish that you had said something. And see if you can remember where you were, as you're imagining this now, and what images come to mind, where you were, who was there, what was the situation. And you might be able to recall how it felt, just that moment when you decided you weren't going to share whatever it was you were thinking of saying, that felt like it was important to say. And maybe something that held you back, a fear that you'd be criticized or belittled or even ignored, or somebody might have thought that it was silly for some reason, or not something that should have been said. And then you can recall how it felt afterwards, after not saying it. If there's some feelings of regret, wishing you could do it differently, one of those times you wish you could go back and rewind the clock, because the time may have passed when it was time when you could say something. And you might notice now what it's like for you in this moment to remember that. How that feels. What feelings come up, what thoughts you have about it, what images come up. Now when you're ready, see if you can think of a time where the opposite happened, where there was something you needed to say, and you might have been scared to say it, but you said it anyway. It felt important to say, and somehow you found the strength to say it. And something where you felt it made a difference to have said it for you or for the people that you were with. Either something that was difficult and you didn't know how you were going to share it with somebody, or could be something that was positive or acknowledgement that you might not have said otherwise. And for this example, for this memory, see if you can recall who was there, where you were, what was happening, what the situation was. What you felt at that moment where you knew you were about to say it, or you were wondering if you were going to say it. In that moment where you did say it, maybe it just came out without you expecting it. And maybe it didn't come out exactly like you had planned it, or maybe it had a different effect than you had imagined. And see if you can recall what it felt like after you said what needed to be said. You may have felt relief, or proud of yourself, or surprised at the reaction that you got, how it turned out. Or proud of yourself for being able to summon up the courage to say a difficult thing. And now notice how it is to recall that experience, where something was difficult or sensitive, where you were able to say it. How it feels now to recall that. And there are lessons in both of those examples. And it may take a moment just to reflect on those things you learned from each of those and how it feels to be acknowledging that now. In a very real way, you're not the same person you were when either of those events happened. And just acknowledging how it feels to be you now and here. The rest of the meditation will be silent, and you can either continue on with this theme, checking in with yourself about feelings and thoughts you're having or your sense of it, or you can just make it a breath meditation. It's your meditation for the next 8 or 10 minutes. It'll end with the gong.